When we left off, Ben was trying to dig up all the information he could about a suicide at a Harford County jail where the suicide rate is 5 times higher than the national average for local jails. On January 18, 2023, Nathaniel Powell Jr. was booked in Harford County Detention Center for domestic assault. About 4 days later, he was found dead. Since Ben was limited by how much the sheriff's office was willing to share, he had a clever idea.
When I was looking for witnesses, it was still very unclear to me what happened to Nathaniel Powell Jr. People's suspicions up against these really heavily redacted reports from the sheriff's office. And the only way I was going to get more information, real information, about what happened would be to find people who were there.
He was going to use public records that anybody can access to get the names of people who were booked in the Harford County Jail on the day that Nate Jr. died. He then used public court records to get those people's addresses, and just like that, he had the addresses of over a dozen people who were potential eyewitnesses to what happened to Nate Jr. on the day that he died. So Ben drove around knocking on doors, and if no one answered, he left notes explaining who he was and why he wanted to talk with them. Several people actually agreed to talk with him anonymously because they feared retaliation.
Back in August, I connected with Nate Jr.'s dad, Nathaniel Powell Sr., and he heavily doubted the sheriff's office explanation that his son killed himself. When we found witnesses who were there with Nate Jr., it seemed more likely that he had. I connected with multiple witnesses who said they remembered Nate Jr. and they specifically remembered him banging on his cell door for hours. One of them said it seemed like he was banging on his door all damn day. One of the witnesses I connected with told me that he believed that the deputies in the jail could have saved Nate Jr.'s life if they had listened to his cries for help or responded earlier.
Our next step was to bring all this information to the warden of the jail and the sheriff himself. We sat down in a conference room at the Harford County Jail. Ben asked them a lot of questions about what they were and weren't doing to prevent suicides. They told us that legally they can't discuss specific cases, so we didn't talk much about Nate Powell Jr. They said that they had no wrongdoing in any of the suicides and that they have recently invested a lot into mental health, such as a new medical provider and jail renovations, including a new camera system.
If somebody wants to kill themselves, if they're determined, if they've made their mind up, they're going to find a way.
They then gave us a tour of the jail, including the cell block where 4 of the 5 suicides occurred, including Nate Jr.'s. The dorm was temporarily closed for renovations, so we got to actually peek inside the cells. This was the cell where Nate Jr. was found dead. Somebody, we're not sure who, scrawled messages on the walls. We talked with experts who said the vast majority of jail suicides happen within 10 days of being booked, and that isolation only exacerbates the issue. Nate Jr. was isolated in this small space for 23 hours a day. The other 3 inmates who committed suicide were also heavily isolated. Nate Jr.'s father, who is from West Baltimore, spent most of his adult life in jails and prisons.
I went in when I was 17. I didn't come until I was 38. Coming from where I come from, sometimes you only get a chance to make one mistake. You can make that decision as a child, and you can pay for that decision for the rest of your life.
Since Ben started investigating, the sheriff's office has changed course and released the suicide letter to Nate Jr.'s family. The ACLU is now representing Nate Sr. and has filed a tort, which is a legal maneuver that lays the foundation for a future lawsuit.
What do you hope happens next? What's the best case scenario?
That somebody gets held accountable for this.
If you want to learn more about this story, including why experts think that these suicides could have been prevented, then you can click the link in our bio.